From being crowned the youngest ever UFC light heavyweight champion to being revered as arguably the greatest MMA fighter of all time, Jon Jones' career is a case study for every fighter aspiring to make it in the business. And our story starts with young Johnny Bones Jones' first ever bout against Andre Gusmão. Now, this wasn't your ordinary debut. Everyone was talking about the new kid on the block, and rightfully so. Jon Jones was coming into his first fight with a fire 6-0 undefeated run. The UFC basically hijacked the light heavyweight and on just 2 weeks' notice, which probably became a trend for him for the rest of his career. Yeah, one of the most ridiculous facts about Jon is that the man would begin his training campaigns weeks before the fight. His dance partner for the night, the Brazilian brute Andre Gusmão. The fight was won on the undercard among some of the biggest names in the UFC. The night Georges St-Pierre took on John Fitch for the welterweight title. Little did he know we were seeing a champion in making ourselves.
Looking to survive. Fitch has gotten hit with something. Caught him with a jab again. A champion.
By unanimous decision, and still...
Jon breezed through Gusmão, winning via unanimous decision, and the first domino was toppled over.
He's a newcomer. That's punches is mostly with on. Oh, he hit him low. Got him low. And Jones is really pushing quickly. Gusmão's
Nelson Hamlet. Johnny Bones Jones.
One by one, they came and fell all the same. But it wasn't just the fact that he was bagging in the W's, it was the way he was obliterating his opponents that made him so dangerous. Jon Jones' domino effect did come to a stop, however, and just before you start to get convinced that the man indeed is human and capable of losing, his only loss in the UFC came because of a DQ. DQ being a pretty docile term for potential homicide. Think I'm exaggerating? An image of an unconscious, bloody-eyed Matt Hamill leaves little to the imagination. You might be wondering, what did he even do to make a man look like that? How about some missiles for elbows connecting to your skull? Referee Steve Mazzagatti called in the fight, which he probably should have done way earlier on into the match. If you saw the match, you would have seen Jon Jones begging Steve to end the match, while simultaneously ground-pounding Matt. Always wholesome to have annihilators like him have a heart. Jon's jaw dropped after hearing the judge's decision, giving the win to Matt because of Jon's illegal elbows.
He's doing a good job. Big elbows. No, he can't do. Which is really not any more powerful than a side-to-side elbow or one that comes from another angle. Anybody beat Matt Hamill up like this? He is truly one of
the disqualification of Johnny Bones Jones. Therefore, the winner is Matt Hamill.
A visibly upset Dana White was seen shouting insults at the ref. And fans, too, debated that the fight should have been declared a no contest. As for Jon Jones, you could say he took that personally, because at UFC 126, he was about to deliver one of the most evil demonstrations of fighter prowess ever seen in the MMA. This time, Ryan Bader was in the crosshair. The match was like watching National Geographic. Jon was on Ryan like a serpent toying with its prey, and the way that the match ended just proved my point. After cornering the Nevada-born fighter against the cage, Jon clasped his head into a terrifying guillotine. From that moment on, time came ticking down for Bader. It was uncomfortable to see, but just when you thought the Ultimate Fighter 8 winner was putting up a fight, the referee called it in. And when Jon Jones let go of Bader's head, he fell to the canvas like a rag doll. What's scarier is how Jon reminisced about the fight in an interview, calling the entire sequence beautiful. This man is literally a supervillain, but needless to say, he really set the tone for the rest of his career with the first jewel in his crown. After trailblazing the light heavyweight division, it wasn't a matter of if, but when Jon Jones would be granted a title shot. The kid was just too good. He absolutely demolished Ryan Bader at UFC 126, making a statement after his only loss in the UFC due to a DQ. Those elbows ain't no joke, and after that, the only obstacle between him and the Holy Grail was Mauricio Shogun Rua. Jon had replaced his teammate Rashad Evans to finally finally get a chance to prove himself on the big stage. And boy, he did not disappoint. Shogun was gunned down by lefts and rights, brutal knees, and Jon Jones' piercing desire to be the top dog in the division. And just like that, history was made. Jon Jones was crowned the youngest ever light heavyweight champion in the UFC. And then from that point, you just couldn't deny the fact that each time Jon competed, you were seeing one of the greatest fighters of our generation. And he has the accolades to back it all up. I mean, what do you say about a man who has more title fights than regular fights in his career, and holding the record for the most title victories with 14? One of the most popular demonstrations of his fighting prowess on the big stage was when he took on another candidate in the GOAT debate, Alexander Gustafsson. At UFC 165, Jon was set to square off against his now longtime arch nemesis, Daniel Cormier, but after suffering an injury and potentially dodging a bullet considering the form Jon was in, the Swedish legend stepped up in an attempt to stop Jon's menacing run in the division. It was like seeing a hero protagonist finally rise up in the face of darkness in an attempt to tame it. Everyone threw in their predictions for the winner, but no one could have predicted just how much of a classic these two gladiators squaring off would be. In the first half of the match, you saw Jon handled like he hasn't been before. It was one of those finally a worthy opponent moments. Everyone was off their seats thinking this time the result would be different. Maybe, just maybe, Gustafsson was going to do the unthinkable. But let's not forget, this is Jon Bones Jones we're talking about. The second half of the fight, Jon turned it around. He brought the fight to Gustafsson, who was clearly shaken. And when the fight went the distance, it was Jon's hand raised via unanimous decision. Many have their opinions on who should have been the winner, but almost all of them would agree that it was the greatest title fight in the history of UFC. The promotion showcased it in the Hall of Fame Fight Wing in 2021. It was baffling to see how he just got better and better with each fight. When critiquing most undefeated fighters, fans, or more specifically haters, try to make the case that they hadn't fought worthy opponents, cough cough, Khabib. But not when it comes to Jon. His Hall of Pain spoke for itself. Legends such as Quinton Rampage Jackson, Chael Sonnen, and Daniel Cormier have had their names piled up in the carnage. Jon went on to win the Fighter of the Year in 2011 and held the light heavyweight title from March of that year to April 2015, continuing his reign from December 2018 to August 2020. Yes, that gap between those dates right there might just be the only chink in Jon Jones' armor. Now, unfortunately, you can't really talk about the highlights of Jon Jones' career without mentioning his struggles with substance abuse, arrests, and cases of domestic violence. He was stripped of his belt twice after being caught with cocaine in his system for the first instance and steroids in the second. It's almost poetic that, at the end of the day, the only person to stop Jon Jones from achieving his potential was Jon Jones himself. Say what you will about Bones, but the record shows, through legendary title wins and violent knockouts, that he really is the greatest of all time.